Good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the Environmental Forum of Marin's webinar on the biodiversity of land, at sea, and on Tam or on Mount Tam. My name is Terry Thomas, and I'm the Director of Ecology for the Environmental Forum. We are speaking to you today from the traditional lands of the Coast Miwok and want to bring their spirit into our circle as we learn about preserving the biodiversity of their ancestral lands. I'd like to thank Marin Conservation League and the Environmental Action Committee of West Marin for sponsoring this event. It is a timely topic as we look towards how climate change adds challenges to our biodiversity work, and we envision the best way for Marin County to approach the 30 by 30 initiative to conserve 30% of our land by 2030. I have to say I had a deep sadness today when I read that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service identified 23 new extinct species in the United States, and it gave a powerful recognition to the urgent need to develop tools and preserve species. And I'm grateful for this afternoon that we can get to discuss it. So let's take a look at the agenda. We'll be introducing Dr. Christina Sloop, who is our moderator. And then Dan Glusenkamp, the Executive Director for the California Institute of Biodiversity, will begin a talk called Saving California Biodiversity, What Do We Have to Lose? Followed by Adam Ratner, who is the Associate Director of Conservation Education for the Marine Mammal Center, and he'll speak about the biodiversity in the ocean. And Lisette Ariano, the Community Science Program Manager for Tam, will conclude with people, science, and nature on Tam. Then Christina will lead us in questions and answers. And Christina is the science advisor for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Service, and she also leads their Science Institute, where over 1,200 scientists integrate biodiversity and climate change resilience into science and conservation work. She also chairs the California Biodiversity Network, which brings key leaders and experts into conserving our California biodiversity. Her spark for nature came in exploring the woods behind her childhood home in Munich, Germany. And she was also inspired by David Attenborough's TV shows. And if any of you haven't seen them, I highly encourage you to take a look. They inspire me as well. She came to the United States as an exchange student and kept going and got her bachelor's, master's, and PhD here. So she must have thought that our education system was okay. She's most proud of her dissertation work on the Spartina, and she helped actually identify that bad guy Spartina we all know about. Her work led her to contribute to nature-based adaptations of sea level rise strategies in the San Francisco Bay. She also greatly enjoyed her years of monitoring waterfowl from an airplane. Seeing the birds from above was a thrill, and so was the airplane rides. I was, as appropriate to this webinar, I was impressed with what she noted to me, that in conservation, all things are connected. Without plants, there's no habitat for wildlife. Without bees and birds, no certain pollination. Without wildlife, there's less seed dispersal. And I quote, nothing occurs in nature in isolation, end quote. So Christina, I turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry, for the kind introduction and for the opportunity to participate in this great forum today, and the pleasure to introduce our speakers. And I think without further ado, I want to jump right in and introduce my longtime colleague and friend, Dr. Dan Glusenkamp, who is the Executive Director of the California Institute for Biodiversity. A little bit of background on Dan. With a PhD from UC Berkeley, Dan previously led CalFlora and the California Native Plant Society, and he directed the habitat protection and restoration efforts at Audubon Canyon Ranch back in the day when I knew him, when I first met him. One very exciting and notable thing to share about Dan is that he rediscovered the presumed extinct Franciscan manzanita plant on a traffic island, no less, at the Golden Gate Bridge in 2009. And Dan's focus in his current role at CIB is to secure systemic change to empower all Californians to save our remarkable biodiversity hotspot now and forever. And therefore, his title of his presentation today is Saving California Biodiversity. What do we have to lose? Welcome, Dan.
Just super cool to see longtime friends here. Folks, you know, one of the great things about being home is that you're there with your friends and you get to see them evolve over years and over decades. And so, Terry, just super great to see you in this new role. And Christina, everyone should know how lucky we are to have Christina have kind of evolved into this role as, you know, biodiversity leader for the state of California right now. So just hi, thanks you guys. And I guess actually that's probably a decent way to start, because part of what I'm going to talk about in this talk is how this time really is super special. And we have, I think we all know that there's a lot of huge threats that we're facing and that our biodiversity is in peril and that we're in the midst of the 6th mass extinction. But I don't think people are aware of the opportunities that we have right now, and that there actually is a chance to pull out of the nosedive before we auger into the ground and you know, and have a beautiful flight for the rest of our time on this planet. So I'm going to quickly talk about biodiversity. I was asked if I could start by kind of reiterating some of what was said in previous segments of this EFM forum. And so I want to reiterate what biodiversity is and why California is important with regard to biodiversity. And I think this is really important. So this is the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity definition. Biodiversity is basically, well, you know, if I'm going to say basically, biodiversity is living creatures. It's those things. It's species, yes, but it's also the variability within species. Biodiversity is, you know, the variation between different populations of a redwood tree and within different trees in a forest. That's biodiversity. And if you're not dealing with species and you're not dealing with individual organisms, or at least ecosystems, then you're not dealing with biodiversity. And there's oftentimes a lot of confusion about this. We talk about biodiversity very broadly because everything is connected to biodiversity. On this living planet, there is nothing that is not connected to biodiversity. It's the most important thing in the universe to us. And so we can speak of it very broadly. But biodiversity is not saving wetlands for clean water. Biodiversity is not building trails for public access. Biodiversity is not weeds or pulling weeds or spreading weeds. Biodiversity isn't carbon storage or ecosystem services. Biodiversity is those really hard things. Biodiversity is the creatures that you cannot identify, those creatures that no one on the planet can identify without actually looking at their DNA. Biodiversity is the basic code of life, the DNA and other stuff that makes every individual a unique bit of the story of life. And that's really hard. It's really challenging to get a good view of that stuff. And so it's very challenging to plan around it and figure out how to save it. And so we revert to, you know, looking for our keys under the streetlights and measuring things that are easy to measure. And so I just want to make that point. And that's the context that I'll be speaking of, you know, when I talk about biodiversity for the rest of this time, I'll be using that kind of an approach. And so just to reiterate, biodiversity is the variability within a population. And there are exciting things going on, even in a family. There are different characteristics and traits emerging. It's the accumulation of organisms within a community, and it's the variability of communities across a landscape. Biodiversity is this variety of life at all scales. And there are certain places on Earth that are blessed with very high biodiversity. And we talk about 35 or 36 biodiversity hotspots. This is Norm Meyer's, you know, take on Norm Meyer's original map of global biodiversity hotspots. And you'll see California there as, you know, hotspot number 8 or whatever it is. And to be clear, this is very important. This isn't another, you know, California is a neat place kind of thing. We're on the list with the Amazonian Basin, with the Western Ghats, Indonesia, Western Australia, the parts of planet Earth that make planet Earth especially diverse, and California is one of them. And so when we say biodiversity in California, we have a global impact. It's not just about saving our backyards. And you know, we all know that California is incredibly diverse with regard to plants, that we have more rare plants than most states even have plants. And we've got 25% of the plants that occur north of Mexico are in California. But we're diverse across the board. superlatively diverse. We have more bees than, I don't know if it's more bees than Amazonia or if we have Amazonian level of bee diversity, but of North America's 4,000 bee species, we have at least 1,600 species of bees, probably a lot more because you got to look at their DNA to really ID them. And so that's California biodiversity. It's pretty special and I like it a lot. It's also very threatened. And so I'm going to go quickly through the list of the things that are threatening our biodiversity, and in doing so, threatening the foundation of our prosperity and of our well-being and persistence. So number one, of course, always is habitat loss due to development, habitat destruction. This is a painting of Mount Tam in 1934. Nice place. I found it in a junk shop in San Francisco. Someone probably took a boat across. That was 3 years before the bridge was finished. So they boated over and painted Mount Tam with poppies. And this is the same, more or less the same view as well as I could reconstruct in 2005. And so this is habitat loss due to development. Number one threat to biodiversity. Number two threat is, as seen here on the other side of Mount Tam, with Helichrysum petiolari invading. Number two threat is biological invasions. And disease is probably more important than weeds, but weeds are easy to show. So there you go. And then the number three threat is pollution. And I wanted to have a special slide on this one, focusing on insects, because pollution is really having an outsized impact on insects. Right now, we're in the midst of what scientists are calling the insect apocalypse, and that's a powerful term that scientists don't usually use, emotion-laden things like that. But it's the only way to describe it. We're seeing apocalyptic declines in insect distribution, abundance, diversity across the planet. And this is largely due to the fact that we finally invented the perfect insecticides, and we're on the verge of winning our species-long war against insects, and pretty soon we won't have any. So pollution is the third largest cause of decline to biodiversity. So now quickly talking about the opportunities that we have, I want to talk broadly about why this is a special time in California and a special time for California to lead the world. With regard to biodiversity and conservation of nature sensu lato. And I want to focus on really three main pathways, three main initiatives that are going on within the state of California right now that are just incredibly exciting, that have been building steam for the last 2-3 years under a couple gubernatorial administrations and promise great results. The first, near and dear to my heart, is the Biodiversity Initiative. Started by Governor Brown. He asked a few of us to come up with a plan. We came up with a charter for securing the future of California's biodiversity. He asked us to come up with an action plan. We all contributed to an action plan. And now we have a California Biodiversity Initiative led by Christina Sloop and Jennifer Norris and other good people, in which all California state agencies are required to make biodiversity conservation a priority. And the state is required to figure out how to do this. It is a core, a base level, root level priority of the state of California. And the best thing about that is that it has unleashed hundreds or thousands of state employees who got into this work because they want to do this kind of stuff, and this directed them to do what they want to do. And so it's a fantastic opportunity. Unfortunately, it comes at, in the midst of a lot of other crazy crises, and it's hard to focus on a real opportunity when you've got apocalyptic wildfires and COVID and everything else. But it's moving forward, and I'm going to talk more about it a little bit later. A second related initiative is the 30 by 30 initiative, which came out of another executive order, this executive order by Governor Gavin Newsom, which was specifically aimed at saving 30% of California's land and oceans by the year 2030 as a step toward the scientific need for half Earth, for us to save half of Earth in order to save 80% of biodiversity and the functioning ecosystems. And in that executive order, Governor Newsom directed that land was to be conserved in order to save biodiversity and to reduce risk due to climate change. And so right now, folks are working on 30 by 30, and I would love to talk to any of you about my thoughts on that and the opportunities there. There's a big stakeholder process, lots of people contributing, but again, the good personnel who have to put together a plan also have to end fire in California and work our way through a pandemic and a lot of other stuff. And so they need our help. And we all need to get clear on what the opportunities are, but hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that moving forward. And the third big initiative is is really the inclusion revolution. And the realization that historic racism has excluded too many people, that classism and limited access to opportunity has really held us back, and that we can't do that anymore. That things have to change and move forward. And in that moral imperative and frankly just a functional imperative, there's a great opportunity to redouble our efforts, get more people on board, and do more bigger stuff. So those are the three big initiatives: biodiversity, land, 30 by 30, and inclusion. And so within that framework, I want to talk about what I think we all should do. And this is my sales pitch to you to get involved and get on board with these things. And so first, we need to save biodiversity. And I guess first, we need to do things. We need to first we need to first admit that we've failed to a large degree, and that we will lose some biodiversity. We may lose a lot of biodiversity, but even under the best case scenarios of conservation, we're going to lose stuff. And we need to admit that so that we can take the appropriate action. And then the second thing that we need to do is to take that action. And so once we admit that we're going to lose some biodiversity, I believe that one of the most urgent actions that we take is to secure what we have right now, to secure actual specimens, pieces of biodiversity in perpetuity, so that we will have them in the future, because some of them are going to disappear regardless of what we do. No matter how successful we are at conservation, we will lose stuff. And this is one example. This is the Franciscan manzanita, one of the last individuals with, I believe, Alice Eastwood, the woman who discovered it and secured the specimens that we have at Lone Hill in San Francisco. And this is, basically that same site now. You can see that street sign says N Manzanita. Isn't that wonderful? And over here is the bluff that she was leaning over. It's now a bluff above tennis courts. So no matter what we do, we will lose some stuff. This is the Franciscan manzanita that was saved. Alice Eastwood collected specimens of it, and they're in the California Academy of Sciences, where she was the curator of botany. And you can see the woman there facing you is Sarah Jacobs, the new curator of Western botany at the CalAcad, showing Alice Eastwood's original specimens to Governor Jerry Brown, who launched the Biodiversity Initiative. And so to be clear, those specimens, we have specimens in our collections of organisms that do not longer exist on planet Earth. And that's why we need to save what's out there now going forward. And this is another reason why we have to do it. This is the plan for a renewable energy development in the United States. Kind of a joking on that, but not entirely. We have to build out our energy development. We have to build transportation, cities, deal with fire and flood. And in all of that, we're going to lose taxa. And so we need to send people out there to collect those specimens and secure them in perpetuity so that we'll have them in the future. And we're making good progress on this. The first big step that we did was to secure seeds of all of California's rare plants as a hedge against extinction. And the legislature, we managed to talk the legislature into funding that project in 2019. They secured $3.6 million to collect seeds of all of our rare plants and bank them under appropriate conditions. And each collection gets banked here in California and then also in Fort Collins at the federal facility. So it takes 2 asteroids to wipe them out off the planet. And we've expanded that now to try and do the same thing for insects, the most diverse group in California. And this slide just shows you a whole lot of the crazy ways that we can use new technologies to do this in a really accelerated way. No longer Alice Eastwood riding horseback and taking carriages to find things, but using DNA, barcoding, automated sensing systems, automated DNA sequencing systems, and image recognition and crowdsourcing and INAT and everything else, to really be able to do this at an incredible scale and still use it as an opportunity for inclusion and opportunity. Okay, so saving things, literally saving them, is the first thing that I think we all need to be doing now. It's relatively cheap, it's a decent backup plan, and in doing it, we develop data that we need. We find out what we have and where it is and how many there are. We get the baseline, and then we can do planning for the next big thing that we need to do, which is save places. Places are fundamental to life, obviously, and we're losing them and going to be losing them very fast. And this slide shows the northern half of Carrizo Plains, the part that was not protected by the federal government. And on the flats, you can see renewable energy development by Berkshire Hathaway, and on the hills above it, you can see what it used to look like, great wildflower displays. And so this is to show that whatever land we don't save, we're going to lose. And this is our last big chance to save land. It's really important to save land. And we have great opportunities right now. The state of California is putting $15 billion into climate resiliency this year. Really an incredible amount of money, incredible investment. And that's essentially, I don't know the baseline number on that, but it's probably something like $1 billion. Is a huge increase. And we're likely to be doing this for a couple more years going forward. And so it's a great opportunity to invest, especially in multi-benefit land conservation, saving land that provides resilience against sea level rise, that allows us to disengage from fire-prone areas or flood-prone areas and move people out of harm's way, and also secure clean water and carbon storage and all of the other stuff. And so this is a great opportunity for multi-benefit land acquisition. And we all need to speak up on behalf of acquisition. It's kind of boring, it's a hassle, no one wants to own it, no one wants to manage it, but we have to do it. And it's up to us citizens to make it clear that saving the land by fee or by easement is a priority. And I believe it needs to be, especially within the context of this 30 by 30 initiative that we have now. And then the third thing that we need to do is that we really need to genuinely and broadly engage all Californians in this work. We need the help, and it's long overdue. It is long overdue to overhaul and fix conservation and include a diversity of voices that have a diversity of solutions and approaches. And so it's part of this initiative at the state is really finally acknowledging the harm that's been done to Indigenous people, the exclusion from everything, and the fact that they are still here with great knowledge and great ability and able to bring tremendous resources and opportunity to all of the stuff that I've talked about so far. And in addition to that, there's obviously the new generations are an incredible resource. We all grew up during a time when the great successes of today hadn't happened yet. When when CEQA didn't exist, Clean Water Act, platforms for organizing people and getting citizens' voices engaged, tools like GIS, drones, social media for coordinating people, INAP for identifying, DNA sampling, all that kind of stuff. They didn't exist. These kids, they grow up with this stuff. Not only do they have the tools available, but their idea of what isn't possible is very different. And that's really important. One of the biggest things holding us back right now is inertia and worries about unintended consequences and concern that, well, we tried that in the 80s and it didn't work, so why try it again? And so the third part is really using these investments and these opportunities, going the extra mile to make sure that not only do they serve the people of Bell Gardens, but they are powered by the people of Bell Gardens. And so those are the three things that I think we need to do. And we've got great opportunities right now to do it. And we can do it. I think we're very used to defeats and we don't celebrate our victories enough. But in Marin, you got to be celebrating them. This is a map of the freeway network plan for Marin, back when Marin was the most pro-environment county in California. And so as you can see, there were freeways planned. They were going to do what they did to Huntington Beach to Marin. And as you know, a small group of Marinites stood up and opposed it, and then started electing each other to the Marin Municipal Water District, which shut down, put a moratorium on new water hookups, and then to the Board of Supervisors. And they framed it like this, and we need to frame it like this. We have a choice now. As they say, extinction is a political choice. We're making these choices today, and we all need to speak up on it. And I would say to this class, to you also need to run for office. You need to take the hit and do the miserable work of being an elected official. More than just people, speaking up in public hearings. We need people from our community to be elected and be in that role, making decisions and representing to the rest of us. And so I would encourage you all to please consider running for office. I believe Barbara Boxer was one of EFM's, MEF's early graduates. And so there's an example of what you can do. And so another thing that I would like to ask is if you're interested in this stuff and you want to help, there's a lot of big things moving forward and we can use your help. If you will go to calalive.org, the end of that email, and click the join button. You don't have to pay anything. You're not going to get weekly newsletters. But when it comes time to speak up to your legislator and ask them to pass for funding for a Sentinel sensor network, you may get an email if you're in the right district asking you to reach out to them. And so I'd ask you to please get involved in that way. And then, of course, get in touch with me about any of this. Look forward to talking.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dan. That was a great overview of the dire state of our biodiversity in California, the initiatives that are happening, and of course the opportunities that that we can all engage in to make a difference. So thanks for that. All right, moving right along. Next, I would like to introduce Adam Ratner, the Associate Director of Conservation Education at the Marine Mammal Center here in Marin. So Adam challenges visitors and community partners to think differently about ocean conservation, using the stories of individual patients that are rescued by the center. And I'm assuming those patients include all sorts of, marine mammals and other ocean creatures. He incorporates topics including climate change, ocean trash, and sustainable seafood into the center's messaging, providing the spark of inspiration and empowerment that allow others to see themselves as the heroes of their community and environment. Adam was named one of the 30 under 30 game changers for the planet by the North American Association for Environmental Education. And he serves as the training director of the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, and currently oversees the center's Climate Literacy Collaborative. The title of this presentation is Biodiversity in the Ocean. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you today. Thank you for tuning in. I get to celebrate the oceans. I work at the Marine Mammal Center, as you heard. So while I would love to spend the next 15, 20 minutes just telling you fun facts about all of the really adorable and amazing creatures in the ocean, I wanted to take the time to really highlight what the animals in the ocean tell us about the larger system. So I want to actually just start by asking a quick poll question to get a sense of what you might know about the Marine Mammal Center. So I believe it's going to be pulled up any moment now. Just thinking about the kind of scale and scope of some of the Marine Mammal Center's work, and what it means to be along the California coast when it comes to marine mammals. So the question is, what is the approximate number of animals that the Marine Mammal Center has rescued since we started around 45 years ago? You've got 1,800 animals, 5,000, 19,000, or 24,000. And we'll give you just a moment to think about it, and then we'll reveal the answer in a minute. Right, and it looks like things are starting to slow down just a little bit. So we can go ahead and reveal kind of the results here, where we have a little bit of a split vote. So around half the people thought around 19,000, in second place 24,000, and then we've got a little bit less on some of the others. It is actually 24,000 animals that the Marine Mammal Center has rescued. And I share this at the beginning of the talk to kind of highlight how fantastic it is to be along the California coast. We are blessed with one of the highest numbers and diversity of marine mammals anywhere around the world. But it also means that we have a little bit of a greater responsibility to take care of them and to learn from the animals that are getting sick. So that's where the Marine Mammal Center comes in. I've been at the center now for a little over 12 years. And the easiest way to describe it is we're the world's largest marine mammal hospital and education facility. So we're rescuing, rehabilitating, and releasing sick and injured marine mammals. But all of those animals tell us stories. They provide research and ideas about what's happening with the individuals, with the species, with the habitats that they live in, and then able to share that out to the scientific community and to the education community at the same time. We've been around for over 45 years at this point. Our operations are global, but our rescue work really highlights 600 miles of California coast from Mendocino down to San Luis Obispo, our main headquarters and our hospital for all the animals in Sausalito. We also have a hospital out in Hawaii, right near the Kona airport for the most endangered seal or sea lion in the US, the Hawaiian monk seal. And all of this work is actually done from an amazing community of support, 1,400 volunteers, donations from the community that help us do all of this. And what I wanted to do today is tell you just 3 stories, because we're really fortunate. We have a lot of these animals in our backyard. We have the opportunity to give them a second chance at life. But beyond just helping an individual animal or celebrating the existence of these animals, what's interesting about marine mammals is they serve as sentinels for ocean health. And the clues that we get from rescuing them can give us ideas of what other animals might need help, what actions we could take to help seals and sea lions, but also whales and fish and land animals and people. So I want to dive into 3 stories for you. Scamper, the California sea lion, Zaire, the northern elephant seal, and Snaggle, the Guadalupe fur seal. So let's start with Scamper here. So this was a 10-month-old, so pretty young pup, found in the southern part of a range, around 4.5 hours south of San Francisco in San Luis Obispo. A family was walking along the beach. They saw this animal and they kind of realized it needed some help. This picture, he's kind of turning a little bit, but you could start to see his rib bones. They could see his hip bones. He wasn't moving particularly well. And they even saw a little bit of tar and oil on his shoulder. So they got on the phone. They gave the Marine Mammal Center a call. We have a 24-hour hotline, 415-289-SEAL. We got our team out there. We evaluated the animal and we realized, yeah, this animal needs some help. Really, really underweight, actually. At 10 months old, should have weighed somewhere between 60 and 80 pounds. So at 24, this was an animal really struggling to find food. Brought to the hospital in Sausalito, made sure that he could eat fish on his own, catching fish, all of these things. And after 2 months, he had a clean bill of health from our veterinarians, was stealing fish from his pen mates. It's actually a good thing. And was released back out to the ocean like a big butterball that he should be. Now, this is what we love to see with the animals, but there's a lot that goes behind the scenes here, what Scamper's story tells us. Now, what's great is that we can also get follow-up on these animals. So this is Scamper 2 weeks after release up in Sea Ranch in Sonoma County, most likely disrupting a harbor seal slumber. But we knew that he was doing okay. He was finding food. He wasn't underweight after being released. So we've got this great success story, but Scamper tells a larger story. He was one of hundreds of skinny, sick sea lions that were washing up on beaches along the California coast. And we know a lot of that is due to things like warming water temperatures. So 2020 was actually the 2nd warmest year on record that we have. And we know that in the ocean, those warm water temperatures can shift where animals live and spend their time. Particularly some of the fish that seals and sea lions love to eat don't like the warmer water. So they go deeper and they go farther offshore. And that might mean that a mom who's nursing her pup now needs to swim farther and longer to find food. Or it might mean that once the pup's on its own, it just simply doesn't have the opportunity to dive deeper or to go farther. It doesn't have that skill set yet. So instead, these animals wash up onto the beaches, starving and sick. So we can start to get a sense of how the ocean is changing by rescuing some of these animals. They serve as canaries in the coal mine, if you will. And sea lions are one of the most common patients that we take care of, but we also see a lot of elephant seals. And around the same time, we got a phone call about a young elephant seal pup that was out on the beach. Family was walking. This is right near Point Reyes National Seashore. And they saw this animal and realized something's just horribly wrong here. The animal wasn't moving. If you look at the picture here, it has kind of all of these little patches of its fur missing. It was making a crazy sound. People got on the phone, gave us a call. We got our team out there and we realized this animal also needed a lot of help. The crazy sound wasn't a cause for concern. Elephant seals just sound like evil chickens. If you've not heard it before, you can Google it or just watch Jurassic Park. They're actually the voices of the velociraptors. So that was something we were used to, but we got out there and we realized this animal is really young and really skinny. while we don't always see the kind of full story of the animals, these animals are really predictable. We know when they're supposed to be born, where they're supposed to be born, how old they should be. And this was a case where we knew something was very wrong. So we brought Sarah to the hospital, got him care for maternal separation and malnutrition. Now, let's take a step back, though, to better understand why this animal was malnourished and separated from mom. When they're born at around 4 feet and 75 pounds. That's the moment they're born. They spend 1 month with mom, and in 1 month, they're going to go from 75 pounds to 300 pounds. A 1-month-old baby elephant seal weighs 300 pounds. Zaire, if we take a quick look back, resembles the one on the right a little bit more. Came in 67 pounds, 250 pounds underweight. This is an animal that got separated from its mom early, didn't get all of that mom's milk, then didn't have the strength to learn how to eat fish on his own or learn how to swim, and was washed out to sea and washed back up on a different beach. Now, luckily, we can help with this. We can give them food and medication. We actually create a fish smoothie for them when they're so young they can't eat on their own and can pump it directly into their stomach through a tube. They go through fish school where we put a fish on a string, drag it around in the pool until they learn to chase it and eat it. And over time, typically 2 to 3 months, they learn how to eat fish. They turn into giant butterballs and they're released back out to the ocean happy and healthy again. But again, Zaire was one of 75 elephant seals at the Marine Mammal Center, most of them suffering this same fate. What does that tell us about what's happening out in the environment? And one of the biggest things is unfortunately storm surge and sea level rise. That these animals are born on beaches like Point Reyes National Seashore or Año Nuevo. And as we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, methane gas, we release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And it acts like this big heat trapping blanket. It warms the air, the land, and the sea. And as that water warms, it expands, and that is sea level rise. And storm surge is kind of one of the bigger problems of sea level rise because it just amplifies it a little bit more. Essentially a terrible metaphor. I'm like 5'8" on the best of days. I've come to terms with the fact I'm never going to be able to dunk a basketball. But if you raise the floor of the court, I'm going to jump higher. That's what storm surge is. And unfortunately, there's not a ton of space on some of these beaches. So as that sea level rises, that storm can get farther up the beach and can now actually separate mom and pup. And if that pup hasn't had that full time with mom, it doesn't know how to swim yet, it doesn't know how to eat, it's gonna need help. And when we look at all of this data, we know that these big important breeding beaches for seals, for sea lions and other marine mammals and all species are disappearing. So this is Año Nuevo, one of the biggest breeding grounds in California for elephant seals, right near Santa Cruz, south of San Mateo. On the right is if we take action right now. On the left, you notice a difference. A lot of that beach being inundated by water and making these animals more vulnerable. So we have a sense that climate change isn't even something that's happening in the future. We know it will get worse if we don't act. But these are things that are happening today, endangering marine mammals, but we know that sea level rise is endangering communities of people all up and down the California coast and around the world as well. So what can we do about it? Well, the Marine Mammal Center is taking action. We actually support a few different collaboratives, helping to build capacity with training around climate change. We also promote different solutions, whether it's around energy solutions, transportation, or whether it's things around food and food justice. There are lots that we can do, and we can go into a lot more details, but you see things like the Safe Streets programs that groups in San Francisco have put forward, a lot of community gardens helping to create local markets for food and accessible food for all communities. And of course, thinking about ways to make our buildings, our homes more energy efficient and utilizing renewable energy. If you're interested in support, there are a few different networks that I would recommend. I have the pleasure of serving as the training director for NOCI, the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, where we've actually brought together social scientists and climate scientists to scientifically test how we talk about climate change and have a lot of different resources and free trainings available. There's also a climate literacy collaborative where we hold workshops, create toolkits aimed specifically on climate solutions, how to amplify and elevate the resources of how we might address this. And you can find more information on these websites. Now, I want to tell one last story that's a little bit different from climate change. We know climate change is one of the big threats, but we also know that there are other things impacting biodiversity in the oceans. In the case of Snaggle, it's not a hidden mystery like climate. We see the impacts directly. This is actually a threatened species called a Guadalupe fur seal, picked up in Marin County. And we know right away, besides the fact that I'm going to tell you he's malnourished, this is an animal caught in trash. Luckily, it was found in time. People got on the phone. They gave us a call. We got out there, brought him to the hospital, and we did surgery. We cut that piece of trash loose, gave him lots of food, gave him lots of medicine, and after 2 months, able to head back out into the ocean. But again, there's a bigger story here. Let's talk about the species. I wouldn't be surprised if many of you have never heard of Guadalupe fur seals before. They are a threatened species, only around 30,000 of them left in the world. They were actually declared extinct back in the 1950s. We thought they were all gone because they used to be hunted and then rediscovered. This is an animal that in our first 40 years, maybe we would rescue 1 or 2 of them. But if you look at this graph, in the last 4 years, we've actually rescued more Guadalupe fur seals than the previous 40 combined. So this is an animal that needs our help. Now we know that most of these Guadalupe fur seals coming in for the same reasons as Snaggle, really malnourished and unfortunately caught in trash. So we want to learn what's going on here. And for Snaggle and for other Guadalupe fur seals, we can attach little trackers onto their backs. Here you might notice a little kind of gray antenna on his back there. And prior to 2015, when we started seeing all these animals, only 3 Guadalupe fur seals ever had actually been followed. If you looked in the best textbooks about what is the migration pattern, what is the habitat for a Guadalupe fur seal, it just said probably Guadalupe Island in Mexico. Like there's a reason they get their name. But other than that, we didn't have much information. So most of the efforts were then being done down in Guadalupe, Mexico to help protect these animals. And it was just random chance that these sick animals washed up on our stretch of California coast. But let's confirm that. So as we saw a lot of these animals getting sick, we got them better, we released them with these satellite tags, and we were shocked. Not only at how many tags we were able to get out, so 25 fur seals being tagged in the last 6 years or so, compared to 3 in previous all-time history, but they didn't go south. They went north. They were hanging out off the coast of California and Oregon and Washington State. We were just looking in the wrong places for where these animals spend their time. It also means that we were looking in the wrong places for where these animals might be kind of facing threats. Now we can help inform policy, protect these areas where the animals actually are by combining the science, the rehabilitation, and the policy work. And we've been able to work with groups down in Mexico as well to see where the healthy animals from Guadalupe Island are going, and again, validated our point. But working together and combining science, policy, conservation, in the last few years, we've gone from 3 Guadalupe fur seals being tracked to close to 70 of them being tracked. And this allows us to better inform our choices. And we can do that when it comes to things like overfishing. There are sustainability programs out there so that they use gear that isn't catching these animals by mistake. Supporting groups locally that we know are doing great work and cutting out that middleman and supporting local business through community-supported fisheries. There are lots of options, whether it's the fishing gear side of it or the plastics that we can take action on. And of course, a lot more information on those actions. You can go to our website, or you know many of the things around reducing single-use plastics. But this gives us a sense of how we can tell some stories about the biodiversity in our world, but dive deeper into what are these causes of damage that they're facing and what are the solutions that are kind of available to us as well. So with that, If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. You've got my information there. Also, the Marine Mammal Center website, marinemammalcenter.org. And I look forward to all of your questions. But thank you again for taking the time joining us today.
Okay. Well, thank you, Adam, for this great overview of the Marine Mammal Center and the stories the large amount of rescued animals there can tell us about the state of our coast and our ocean, and of course also about climate change. It really shows how working collaborations can lift us all up in our quest to protect the oceans and what we have to do to focus to take action. All right, now as our final speaker, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Lizette Arellano. Dr. Arellano works at the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy as the Community Science Program Manager for the One TAM Collaborative. One TAM is a partnership between 4 public agencies: Marin Water, National Park Service, California State Parks, and Marin County Parks, and the nonprofit Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy to leverage the skills and resources of each partner and inspire community members to support the long-term stewardship of Mount Tam, which we all know and love. Together, they protect some of the most beautiful, ecologically rich, and well-loved open spaces in the region, and an important source of drinking water for Marin County residents. The One TAM Community Science Team supports the health of Mount Tamalpais through a variety of community science activities that aim to address ecological data gaps, implement long-term monitoring, provide meaningful educational opportunities, and promote curiosity and participation in a wide range of audiences. So Dr. Arellano is an ecologist, naturalist, educator, and storyteller with a broad interest. The title of her presentation is People, Science, and Nature on Mount Tam. Welcome, Lizette.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. It's good to be here with my home crowd. All right, folks. So she said it all, a lot of it. So I'm just gonna go right ahead and get started. Great. So as Christina already said, Mount Tam is a very well-loved part of Marin County and the Bay Area and the world. The One TAM collaboration has been key to ensuring its well-being into the future. We all know how special this place is, and in fact, in 2016, One TAM land managers joined forces with scientists from different sectors to evaluate the health of the mountain. They looked, so these were scientists from different, from the public sector, the private sector, academia, coming together with community members, some of you might be in the audience actually, to look at 20 different indicators of ecological health. In that effort, their condition and trend was assessed, and so it was kind of a report card issued. And what it told us overall is that Mount Tam is in fair health, and that each of these indicators, for some of them we knew a lot, particularly those with strong regulatory mandates. For those that don't have that level of protection or regulation, turns out we don't actually know a whole lot. So these were big questions that needed big solutions. And that is how community science came to be at One TAM. And community science, very broadly written, is the practice of bringing together professional scientists and non-professional scientists. So pretty much everybody coming together to learn something new about our world, to generate new knowledge, and to in this particular case, since we're doing ecological work, do long-term monitoring. So let's, I just want to start by acknowledging that at the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, which is again the organization that I work for, community science has a long history and has been going on pretty much since the Conservancy started. My colleague Alan Fish has been at the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory doing that work. And I just want to say that I am like a newer addition to that very storied practice here in Marin County. So I'm going to take you on a whirlwind tour of what it is that we do at One TAM Community Science. And I think, you know, Dan and Adam just gave such wonderful summaries of where we're at and what kind of action is needed, and a lot of global and national context as to where we're at, and some, you know, Christina's also given us some good regional context. And so I'm going to focus this into like the very local and some of the things that you could do even, maybe not like, you could do like next weekend, because this weekend's probably already busy, but next weekend you could probably get something going. All right, so let's start by talking about the Marin Wildlife Picture Index project. So the Wildlife Picture Index is actually a term with broader usage. It refers to a biodiversity index used globally. So an index is a composite measure that tells us about species richness and species evenness. So that's species diversity. So you can think about it as, you know, it's like a single number that tells us something, kind of like the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ, for example. The index is calculated using a standardized method that uses camera traps, and it's a landscape level metric. So WPI doesn't tell us a whole lot about what's happening by, say, our favorite trail or our favorite picnic bench, but it tells us about the landscape, right? And that is the whole purpose of the One TAM Collaborative, is to do landscape level science and stewardship. So just really brief overview of how it works. The camera traps are set up in a grid pattern throughout central and southern Marin County, along the Lagunitas Creek watershed and the Redwood Creek watershed. There have been between 180 some odd and 110 cameras throughout the different study design grids. These cameras are checked quarterly by staff, and the data is collected. And you know, once the data is collected, it needs to be cataloged in order to be usable. So those images need to be labeled in some way. And I think to date, gosh, in my last calculation, we have collected more than 8 million images total since 2014. That's about 2 million images per year. And I will get into how that's going. And then with all of that data, we're able to do, well, by we, I really mean Dr. Townsend, our consultant and collaborator, Dr. Sue Townsend, our consultant and collaborator, is able to generate what are called occupancy metrics, and then generate that composite measure that is the Wildlife Picture Index. So the Wildlife Picture Index allows us to learn a lot of things. Like I said, it's a measure of biodiversity. This is allowing us to estimate a baseline, and then consequently changes in abundance. Prior to this, you know, I know it sounds funny to think of like how many squirrels are on Mount Tam. Like who knows, who cares? Actually, we kind of have a way to know that. And when we take that as at the guild level, you know, with all terrestrial mammals, that information is quite informative in terms of the overall ecosystem functioning of the region, right? This method having camera traps will also allow us to identify key wildlife habitat. And once we have sufficient data, like, again, I want to really emphasize that what we're going for here is long-term monitoring, and long-term in the ecological sense takes a while. It takes a while to really get there. So, you know, eventually this can tell us something about habitat and the relationships to biodiversity. And there are many unexpected adventures along the way. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we have learned so far. And we're going to start with like a little orientation. Okay, so first let's make this really clear. Let's parameterize this. So the study area has 2 regions to it. Since 2014, there has been the north array that is running along the Lagunitas Creek watershed. Since 2016, in the summer of 2016, there has been a south array running along the Redwood Creek watershed. So you can see where those colorful grid cells are, that's where the cameras are located. And with each of these arrays, there are subarrays nested that represent different habitat types or different jurisdictions. So that's why there's all these different colors. The data stories I'm going to tell you apply only to the data that was from 2014 to 2017 for the North Array, and then for only for the summer of 2017 for the South Array. So I'm going to show you this representative sketch of the data. Because really, if I was going to show you all of this, you know, you'd have a lot of little graphs, and we'd probably need like about an hour to really kind of delve into this. It's pretty, it's a lot. But you can, the data that we got from this, some of the data that we got from this are the seasonal estimates of occupancy, and the different colors with the little paw kind of symbols. Those are different species. So, so again, we're seeing the changes in occupancy season to season by species. So for the summer of 2017, so for the summer of 2017, we also have, let me back up. So we also have the Wildlife Picture Index, which is again a composite measure, and we only have it right now for the North Array. We need a minimum of 3 years in order to be able to even make a line. And right now, based on what we know from that 2014 to 2017 period, is that the Wildlife Picture Index is slightly decreasing over that 3-year analysis. Now, I just want to caveat this that I don't have time to get into specifics as to why that is and like look at the seasonal analysis, but I just want to say that we only have 2 points, and so it's hard to draw conclusions from just 3 points. You know, for anything else that I think we measure, you know, your heart rate or your steps or the performance of your stock portfolio, you don't necessarily begin to make big decisions or panic over 3 points, right? It's just starting. And again, just to emphasize that what we have learned from this project is that the value of long-term monitoring builds over time. The second thing I want to tell you is that what we have learned from this is that mammals need landscape level conservation. And I know in some ways, you know, we already know that. There's a lot of evidence of that already, but now we really know it for this particular place and this particular guild. So we know for the mammal guild here that they are using the landscape throughout their life history. So again, they're competing, you know, they're having babies and they're growing up and they're meeting new mates. We know that each component of the landscape is a little bit different. And overall, we hypothesize that the identity and the sum of the parts matters. The second major finding, like I already said, is the Wildlife Picture Index, but so with that, I also just want to show you something really cool. So, and I'm putting up this advisory because these images are, they're Photoshopped and they're really fun. And I just told my colleagues that I would put up a viewer advisory. So no one thought this was how nature actually looks. But we've been able to detect 17 of the mammal species that would, native mammal species. There are some interesting, you know, we've been able to detect the evidence of large predators, such as the mountain lion, and some rarities, including the spotted skunk. Overall, we've been able to see that some of the more, should we call like edge species, like the opossum, in that time period, don't seem to have infiltrated into the core of the mountain region. And we are excited to, again, report the presence of animals like badgers and long-tailed weasels. It took quite a long time to finally get long-tailed weasel. Happened about 4 years into the project. And again, I want to probably, you're wondering, where is the rest of the data? And like I mentioned, there's a lot of data. Every year we get about 2 million photos, and that is an awful lot. And about 85% of our, 60 to 85% of any wildlife camera data set is just images of grass or blanks or shadows. And so that's a big problem that needs a big solution. So for the, since the end of 2019, We have been eagerly awaiting for Wildlife Insights, which is a collaboration of Conservation International and tech giants, including Google, to have like this new platform and relaunch our volunteer program. So I am really excited. You're probably the first people to hear this officially in the public, that we are on track to relaunch this program to the public with the new software in 2022. So again, that's something that you can get involved in. We could not have done what we have already done without doing it together as a community. And another thing that has been loud and clear about this project is that this has been a really key project in training the next generation of conservation professionals here in Marin County. Something I've heard a lot from my colleagues is that this project made them realize how important collaboration is, what it takes to work with big data, and we in ecology, we are in the age of big data, what it means to gain community trust, like your trust, that it means a lot to us. And what it means to dream big. And I really think that this data set will be a legacy that will help others after us build new knowledge and formulate solutions in ways that we can't imagine just yet. Our other major project that we have been working on right now is the Tamalpais Bee Lab. This is a collaboration with Dr. Gretchen Lebon at San Francisco State. And again, this is also a standardized protocol that is meant for long-term monitoring. It's pretty simple. We set out these, we basically set out party cups with some liquid in them that, they're colorful, so the bees fly into them. And so we do have to do lethal take. And the reason for that is that bees are difficult to ID when they're flying. So we need to pin them museum style in order to be able to identify them. And like Dan mentioned, there's a lot of knowledge still that we need in order to really help our pollinators. So this is part of that body of work. And again, this is telling us about, species diversity and abundance. It's allowing us to evaluate the risk of pollinator decline, especially for some of the more specialist plant populations, allowing us to develop distribution maps at the regional level, but also at the continental level. And again, look at what our current land use is doing to bee diversity. So far, what we have data from Marin Water and Mount Tam State Parks. We're currently working on collections from the Marin Headlands and Point Reyes and sort of the Dipsy, Stinson Beach area slope of Mount Tam. And again, this is the expected historical record of species in Marin. That did not animate. Oh, there we go. And the most recent survey indicates that about half of that historical record has been located, as well as most of the genera that would be expected. So that's great news. But we don't really know what that means sort of in context of like long-term monitoring. And the most frequently encountered bee on Mount Tam is, per these surveys at that point, is the tripartite sweat bee. So that little guy with a little bead of moisture on its face. And I just put this up. So all of these images are derived from iNaturalist. And like I said, it's hard to ID. Sometimes it's really hard to ID bees from these images. But I always encourage folks to go ahead and try, because there are some very talented identifiers out there. And every time we're able to see one of these pollination relationships or to see a behavior, that is really valuable to the overall enterprise of building knowledge about our region together. Lastly, I also want to invite you to the Tamalpais Bee Lab events, where you can help, you can contribute to the museum pinning of these specimens. You can just go to the One Tam website, and we have morning and afternoon sessions most of the Saturdays this fall.
Thanks so much, Lisette, for the great local perspective and the overview of all the professional and non-professional collaborations that actually look at the health of Mount Tam biodiversity. And to outline for us what can be done to lift up the fair health score of the area. And also thank you for pointing out that community science is a key component of any approach that is chosen, especially in the context of monitoring and assessment of the landscape. Great talk. So inspired by Lizette's talk and the previous two talks to share a little bit about what we're doing at the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Science Institute in particular. Besides our marine protected areas that we monitor regularly, we are now also establishing a climate biodiversity sensor network on our own ecological reserves and wildlife areas throughout the state. We have about 740 some sites, and that adds up to over 1.2 million acres throughout California. And so what we're doing there is we're installing weather stations and also camera traps, acoustic sensors, and monitoring of permanent vegetation plots is part of our approach. And so it's exciting to see this also happening at Marin, Mount Tam area, as Lizette was sharing. And so Lizette, we should talk a little bit more about what's going on. We're also using wildlife insights at the department, and so I'm very excited to hear about that.
I just sent my recruitment email to our pilot volunteers, so I'm happy to talk more about our experience. It's been quite a journey.
All right, great. Well, I want to thank all of our speakers for their excellent presentations, very inspiring and important information for all of us. And I think, there's a lot of positive, there's a lot of opportunity, and I think we can make a difference in a change. So now, for the rest of the time that we have, we can dive into some of the questions that some of you have posted. So let's see. Here's a question for Dan. Can you please spend more time sharing the measures and measurements for success that California is using to confirm positive impacts and restoration of biodiversity?
Oh, hi. Yeah, that's a really good question. And it'd be interesting to hear what other speakers think. And probably no one is better equipped to answer that than Christina Sloop, I should think. I think we're still developing that stuff. To be honest, I think we're in the early ages and we have a lot of room for improvement. Part of that is that, as I said, biodiversity is hard. For example, we know that we're experiencing catastrophic insect declines, but that's about all we know. At this point, kind of our resolution on that is, pixel size. We can only detect pixels the size of a block. We know that something is declining when it is an extremely widespread organism that is very easily recognized, like the monarch butterfly, the European honeybee. And then we only can detect declines when its decline is something like 90% a year, every year for a decade. That's not enough. And that's because, for insects, the classic way to collect them is to put out a big trap. You get a plastic bottle with 50,000 little insects in it and alcohol. You give it to some PhDs to sort into piles based on order, and then some other PhDs might be able to sort it as far as family, maybe. You ultimately wind up sending these subsamples off to the world expert in this. There's only one person in the world who can identify this kind of spider. And he's 80 years old and blind and has 1,000 jars ahead of you. And so we have not had the ability to collect data on this stuff. And you don't act on what you can't measure. However, that's changed. We have new tools, DNA barcoding, where you can essentially just get a barcode for each individual organism, and then meta barcoding, where you can take that little jar of alcohol, and instead of doing the process I told you about, you can just decant a little bit of the alcohol, mix it with some lysate, send it to a lab with $50, and they send you back a list of all the sequences that are in there, all the barcode sequences that, just like scanning what's in your supermarket shopping cart, you have a list of all the organisms in that jar. Mind-blowing advances over the old way of doing it. We're not yet deploying these things. That, as I told you, that's super inexpensive. You can have a sensor network that covers California that, with some state investment to roll them out, say at Sentinel sites or the kind of sites that Christina's talked about, you can build a pretty good network But given that these systems might just cost a few $100s, and the meta barcoding lab costs might be, $10 or $50, you can see individuals, organizations, schools, museums, wealthy landowners all being interested in having these semi-automated systems on their land. And you could foresee a network to monitor insect biodiversity across all of California with thousands or even tens of thousands of nodes that give you extremely high resolution. So I would say at this time, we do a very inadequate job of monitoring biodiversity outcomes of our investments. I think biodiversity is short shrift overall. But that can change fast, and we can make it change. And part of that is by being clear on our definitions of biodiversity. When we talk about biodiversity, yes, we mean those annoying bugs, the LBBs, whatever it is. Those, I can't ID these mushrooms. It doesn't matter. You can take a pinch off it and send it to a lab with $10 and get a sequence.
Which, by the way, if you're interested in mushrooms, we do have, as part of our BioBud series on Mount Tam, and to Dan's point, there's a lot of cryptic biodiversity, like even in a place as well resourced and as well studied as Mount Tam. So we do invite folks out to come and join us and do some mushroom identification and learn about mushroom identification. And I'm seeing some of our alumni as participants. We, expect an announcement soon if public health conditions allow.
Very cool. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, so it really is kind of exciting, and it's kind of crowdsourcing in a way, because with iNaturalist, the tool that is basically on your app, you can go anywhere and you can just go, oh, what's this? You take a picture, and then the Cal Academy of Sciences has all this cataloged worldwide actually, and you can just kind of find out, well, maybe this is it. And then, it's the community of scientists that then come together and actually evaluate my personal photo and say, well, you are right, or well, maybe you want to consider this one. It looks more like that. But if 2 or 3, I forget, people agree, then it is science grade. And then it goes into a different database and it will actually inform, important decisions on biodiversity. So that's really cool. And I think we've come a long way from just talking about, acres in terms of a success measure for conservation and, restoration efficacy, which is still, like Dan said, challenging. And at the Department of Fish and Wildlife where I work, we are definitely working toward a better way to assess that, because we give out, millions of dollars every year for these types of projects. And we want to make sure that they actually hit the target. But I do agree with Dan and Lisette that we need to ramp up and do some more kind of cool sciencey stuff and get the answers for the biodiversity piece in particular. So thank you.
Yeah, and to Dan's point early in his talk, I just want to add, this is a matter too of building the human potential to do this. It takes a long time to gain regional and taxonomic knowledge as computational and molecular technologies have advanced. Old-fashioned natural history has been de-emphasized from undergraduate education. And so a lot of that knowledge, that very specialized knowledge about biodiversity, actually, is out in the community. A lot of that is about bringing people together, about teaching those technologies so that people can collectivize the knowledge and contribute to our collective understanding of biodiversity.
Okay.
We're echo chambering each other, but I want to double down on that and say that, the old way of doing it, of, identifying these things requires an improbable sequence of events. You got to be born in the right neighborhood, in the right family, get into, you got to manage to do well in school and get into the right college and finally fight your way through a PhD and then get a job and, get funding. And then you are able to identify mushrooms. And that's not just exclusive, but it's exclusionary. And it's not just exclusionary from the work, but from the entire enterprise of doing biodiversity work. And basically all humans are extremely good taxonomists. The ones that couldn't identify stuff either starved to death or they poison themselves. And every human has that Paleolithic botany ability, which is much more powerful than what you're going to learn in school. So we not only need to democratize the tools, but in doing so, we need to democratize just, the idea that you could be a biologist.
Thank you. That's a very, very good point. Let's move on to another question. Here's one. With this desertification of California due to climate change, are lands targeted for conservation based in part on lands that will host ecosystems that are projected to have evolved into the target condition in the next 25 to 75 years? Anyone would like to take that one?
Yes, to a degree. People are including climate change projections in building conservation portfolios and figuring out what lands we should preserve. My feeling is that we're overdoing it, that we're too concerned about that. That gives us a chance to feel like we're in control of things, and we aren't. There's a few basic principles that, for one, California is biodiverse because of climate change. Because during at whatever scale you want to look, climate has gone like this in California. And each time it zigs and zags, you lose some stuff, but you also gain a lot of stuff. And California is biodiverse because we have places like Mount Tam, where you have topographic diversity that a northern climate species can persist during dry and hot times. And so we have to give these creatures some those things that have persisted for millions and millions of years under incredibly variable conditions. They have some skills that we don't understand, and we have to realize that global bulldozing is likely to be more important in the short term than global climate change. And so we basically just need to save all the lands. If things are there, if it's a biodiverse site, you need to save it. You also need to be mindful of climate change and save those sites that have been sanctuaries over previous times of change. Those sites in eastern Contra Costa County that were Mojave Desert 9,000 years ago and have been waiting for it to get hot and dry again so they can expand. And then those sites on the north slope of Mount Tam that have been cool and damp during a drying era and hold species that have been lost from the rest of the landscape as things got dry. We need to save the special places, but mostly we just need to save places and trust that the creatures that are there know how to live.
Yes, thank you for that. One other question here is, can you say a little more about how individual level diversity plays into the concept of biodiversity? Is species loss driven by or associated somehow with loss of individual level diversity? Is it, or?
I'm wondering if the question asker could clarify what they mean by individual level diversity. Or maybe other folks have a.
Well, to me, it sounds like this talks about, the genetic diversity. Is this, something that contributes to the loss of larger, like, species diversity? And the answer is yes. And, so it just depends on what species you're talking about and how they reproduce and, how the diversity gets defined in that sense. But the short answer is yes.
I will add on to that, though, that within the marine mammal field, we've seen incredible resiliency, exactly to what Dan kind of said about these animals finding ways to thrive. If you take the elephant seal population, so elephant seals were hunted drastically for their blubber back in the late 1800s. We thought they were gone. We then found around 20 years later a population of anywhere from around 20 to 100 animals down in Mexico. That was it. And at that point, they were like, okay, we have a second chance now. They protected those 20 to 100 animals. And today, that population's close to 200,000. So they are pretty astounding. The same example for sea otters in California, for Guadalupe fur seals. So it's still something where they're not out of the woods yet. There is a genetic bottleneck and impacts, but if we give these animals a chance, it's pretty amazing how far they can go.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, you have classic cases like the black-footed ferret or the cheetah, which declined to population sizes too small. And then it wasn't a one generation bottleneck. The bottleneck continued. And so, over one generation, like with elephant seals, you can bottleneck down to very few individuals. And if you bounce back, you've saved most of the genetic diversity, and they can evolve resistance to disease and stuff like that. But if the bottleneck continues for 2 or 3 or 4 or more generations, you lose genetic diversity. And for black-footed ferret and the cheetah, they just don't have resistance to disease anymore. No matter what we do, the disease will find them and wipe them out. So, and there's an important lesson there, that even though things may be pretty bad right now, we can, if we bounce back swiftly, most of the harm that we've done will not be right. Much of the harm that we've done will not persist. And so it's really not a lost cause yet.
Okay, thank you for that perspective. We have time for one more question, and then we'll have to wrap it up. So let me see here. Generally, how do you define biodiversity of insects? For example, what is the difference between cataloging the insects and assessing biodiversity of a species? What are the questions that you ask?
Yeah, I'll take take that one. So I think when we're talking about biodiversity of anything, we're talking about, again, species richness. So how many species do we have? And then you get into all these kind of philosophical and practical queries of like, what is a species? How do we define a species? And we're not here for that seminar today, but we could have it. And then we're also talking about the proportion of the abundance of those different species in a given region, right? And that's what gets termed as biodiversity. For insects, the knowledge of species richness is not very, doesn't have very high resolution, again, because as, bipedal mammals with big googly eyes, we're kind of biased against them. Sometimes for good reason, mosquitoes, ticks, like don't need that. And then in other cases, because it's hard, like it takes a lot of patience and and study, even outside of the formal education, of just takes a lot of patience and time to learn to tell apart different tarsus lengths. And so, when we're talking about what's the difference between cataloging and assessing biodiversity, I think cataloging, I kind of interpret that more as like we're looking at, which species we have. We're trying to just kind of do, I don't want to call it stamp collecting, but we're just trying to assess like count the number of species we have, or catch the Pokemons, if you will. When we're talking about assessing biodiversity, we're also trying to get measures of abundance. And with insects, their abundance, I mean, with anything really, but insects in particular, their abundances will go up and down and up and down. And we don't currently have an understanding of what the drivers of those are. We can hypothesize about them. Some of them are probably ecological, some of them are evolutionary, but we don't have clear knowledge about that. And so Sam Droege, who is a USGS bee biologist in Maryland, is fond of saying that it's hard to make a management plan for any one species of bee if we don't know enough about like its life history, and all of its habits.
Yeah, that is an important point that is not often, recognized enough. With that, thank you all very much. This was a lot of fun. I'm so glad I got to be part of it. Thanks for all the work you do. And I will let Terry finish us out here. Thanks so much.
Hi all. All right. So in conclusion, I think that we have some possible next steps and action items to share with you. And I'll let you ponder those while I give a huge thanks to Christina and Dan and Adam and Lisette. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience and your wisdom with us. It's been really interesting, and I've learned a lot, and I thank all who have joined us, and hopefully they also learned a lot from your discussions. I have a lot to take away from it. So I also, in addition to these action items, I would like to add one more. And I was inspired to say this from some of the comments from, I guess Dan showed his kids and mentioned the next generation. And I would consider that you also share a piece of nature with a child, because a quote that I've heard before says, "What is the extinction of a condor to a child who has never seen a wren?" Unquote. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and I wish you all a great evening.